This happened when I flew into LAX last winter. It had been a long, exhausting flight, and all I wanted was to get to my hotel, take a shower, and crash. I was waiting for my Uber outside baggage claim when I noticed a guy who had been on my flight standing nearby. He looked over at me and nodded, and I nodded back, just to be polite. My Uber pulled up, and as I was about to get in, the guy walked up to me and said, "Hey, are you heading downtown? I'm going that way too." I was thrown off, but quickly said, "No, sorry, I'm going somewhere else." He just smiled, shrugged, and stepped back, but he kept watching me as I got into the car. I thought that was the end of it. I arrived at my hotel, checked in, and headed to my room. But as I was getting my key card from the desk, I saw him walk into the lobby. My heart dropped. It was definitely him, the same guy from the airport, and he was just standing there, looking around like he was searching for something. I rushed to my room, locked the door, and tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. About an hour later, though, there was a knock at my door. I froze. Nobody knew I was staying here, and I didn't know anyone in the area. I walked over to the door, looked through the peephole, but there was no one there, just an empty hallway. I went back to bed, trying to calm myself down, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Nice room you've got." My blood ran cold. How did he get my number? I immediately called the front desk and explained what was going on. They offered to move me to another room on a different floor, and I agreed. As I was leaving my room, I made sure to keep an eye out. Just as I was stepping into the elevator, I saw him again at the end of the hall, watching me. That stare. It was like he knew exactly what he was doing. I checked out the very next morning. I'll never know how he got my number or if he really was following me, but I'm just grateful I got out before anything worse happened. I was on a solo trip to Europe last year, super excited and ready to start this big adventure. I get on the plane, find my seat, and get settled. There's a guy sitting next to me, maybe in his late 40s, business casual, seemed normal at first, but as soon as I sit down, he leans over and says, "Where are you heading?" I didn't want to be rude, so I just said, "Europe," and turned back to my phone. He didn't take the hint. He kept asking if I was traveling alone, how long I'd be gone, if I had any special plans for my trip. I started feeling uncomfortable and tried to keep my answers short, but he just kept leaning closer, like he wasn't going to back off. Then he notices I'm scrolling through my phone and starts watching what I'm doing. He actually leans over to look at my screen and says, "Oh, that's a nice picture. You have a great smile." I tried to laugh it off, but he was already asking about the people in my photos. "Who's this guy?" he asked, pointing to a friend of mine. "Are you too close?" I could feel myself freezing up. I didn't want to start a scene, but I felt trapped next to him. He kept prying, asking questions, getting bolder with each one. He said something like, "You look like the adventurous type. I bet you're wild when you're out on your own." I felt my face go red, and I just mumbled something and pretended to be fascinated with the in-flight magazine. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, so I got up and went to the bathroom just to get away. I took my time, hoping he'd get the message. When I got back to my seat, he was waiting there with this creepy grin, like he knew he was making me uncomfortable and enjoyed it. For the rest of the flight, I kept to myself, but I could feel him watching me. Every now and then I'd glance over, and he'd still be staring. When we landed, I grabbed my stuff and practically ran off the plane, hoping to lose him in the crowd. But as I'm walking through the terminal, I feel a chill run down my spine. I look back and there he is, just a few feet behind me. I ducked into a crowded coffee shop and stayed there until I saw him leave. To this day, I don't know what he wanted, but I still get creeped out thinking about how far he was willing to push. This happened to me last year when I was flying back home from a work trip. My flight had been delayed, so I didn't get in until close to midnight. The airport was practically empty, and I was exhausted. Just wanted to grab my bag, get a cab, and go home. I finally found my suitcase, dragged it outside, and headed for the line of cabs parked at the curb. I walked up to the first one, and the driver, a middle-aged guy with a receding hairline and this old leather jacket, waved me over. I got in, gave him my address, and leaned back, just trying to relax. But almost immediately I felt uneasy. He started driving, and for some reason my stomach just dropped. At first I thought I was just tired and overthinking things, but then he started talking to me. He asked, "You traveling alone?" And I, trying to keep things light, just said, "Yeah, work trip." He gave a little nod but didn't respond, and the silence was tense, really uncomfortable. Then he started asking all these weird questions. He asked if I lived alone, what kind of neighborhood I was in, and if my boyfriend was waiting for me at home. My heart started pounding because it hit me that I'd already told him I was alone, and I felt trapped. I tried to give vague answers, but he kept glancing back at me in the rearview mirror with this unsettling smile. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick text to my brother, asking him to meet me outside my apartment building. When the driver noticed me typing, he actually turned around while still driving and asked, "Who are you texting?" I lied and said my boyfriend was waiting up for me. He just chuckled and said, "You don't look like the kind of girl with a boyfriend." I felt a chill go down my spine. We were getting close to my neighborhood when he suddenly turned off the main road onto this narrow, dark side street. I tried to stay calm and asked, "Why are we going this way?" He just smiled again, saying, "It's a shortcut." I knew I had to get out. As we slowed down at a stop sign, I grabbed my bag, threw open the door, and ran. I didn't look back. I just ran down the street until I was far enough away to feel safe. I hid behind some bushes and texted my brother again, telling him to come pick me up. When my brother arrived, we went back to where I'd jumped out, but the cab was gone. I reported it, but nothing ever came of it. To this day, I think about what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my gut and gotten out of that cab.